All right, let's do this. This is the second part of my. Or I'm sorry, this is the second video of me reading the eighth part of The Color of Magic. When he awoke, a dragon was watching him. At least it was staring in his general direction. Rincewind groaned and tried to dig his way into the moss with his shoulder blades and gasped as the pain hit him. Through the mist of agony and fear, he looked back at the dragon. The creature was hanging from a branch of a large dead oak tree several hundred feet away. Its bronze gold wings were tightly wrapped around its body, but the long equine head turned this way and that at the end of a remarkably prehensile neck. It was scanning the forest. It was also semi-transparent. Although the sun glinted off its scales, Rincewind could clearly make the outlines of the branches behind it. On one of them, a man was sitting, dwarfed by the hanging reptile. Yeah, dwarfed by the hanging reptile. I think I may have said something else, and I don't know. He appeared to be naked, except for a pair of high boots, a tiny leather hold-all in the region of his groin, and a high-crested helmet. He was swinging a short sword back and forth idly, and stared out across the treetops with the air of one carrying out a tedious and unglamorous assignment. A beetle began to crawl laboriously. I've never said that word out loud. Up Rincewind's leg. The wizard wondered how much damage a half-solid dragon could do. Would it only half kill him? He decided not to stay and find out. Moving on heels, fingertips, and shoulder muscles, Rincewind wriggled sideways until foliage masked the oak and its occupants. Then he scrambled to his feet and hared off between the trees. He had no destination in mind, no provisions, and no horse, but while he still had legs, he could run. Ferns and brambles whipped at him, but he didn't feel them at all. When he had put about a half-mile between him and the dragon, he stopped and collapsed against a tree, which then spoke to him. This isn't good. Psst, it said, dreading what he might see. Rincewind let his gaze slide upward. It tried to fasten on innocuous bits of bark and leaf, but the scourge of curiosity forced it to leave them behind. Finally, it fixed on a black sword, thrust straight through the branch above Rincewind's head. Is that Kring? Don't just stand there, said the sword, in a voice that sounded like the sound of a finger dragged around the rim of a large empty wine glass. Pull me out. Well, what? Said Rincewind, his chest still heaving. Pull me out, repeated Kring. It's either that or I'll be spending the next 1,000,000 years in a coal measure. Did I ever tell you about the time I was thrown into a lake up in the... What happened to the others, said Rincewind, still clutching the tree desperately. Oh, the dragons got them. And the horses. And that box thing. Me too, except that Haran dropped me. What a stroke of luck for you. Well, began Rincewind. Kring ignored him. Expect you'll be in a hurry to rescue them, it added. Yes. Well, so if you just pull me out, we could be off. Rincewind squinted up at the sword. A rescue attempt had hitherto been so far at the back of his mind that, if some advanced speculations on the nature and shape of the many-dimensioned multiplexity of the universe were correct, he was right at the front. But a magic sword was a valuable item, and it would be a long trek back home, wherever that was. He scrambled up the tree and inched along the branch. King was buried very firmly in the wood. He gripped the pommel and heaved until lights flashed in front of his eyes. Try again, said the sword encouragingly. Rincewind groaned and gritted his teeth. Could be worse, said Kring. This could have been an anvil. Okay, but you're not. Yeah, hissed the wizard, fearing for the future of his groin. I have a multidimensional existence, said the sword. I have had many names, you know. Amazing, said Rincewind. He swayed backward as the blade slid free. It felt strangely light. Back on the ground again, he decided to break the news. I really don't think rescue is a good idea, he said. I think we'd better head back to a city, you know, to raise a search party. The dragon's headed upwards, said Kring. However, I suggest we start with the one in the trees over there. Sorry, but you can't leave them to their fate. Rincewind looked surprised. I can't, he said. No, you can't. Look, I'll be frank. I've worked with better material than you. Sword just called him material. But it's either that or... Have you ever spent 1,000,000 years in a coal measure? Look, so if you don't stop arguing, I'll chop your head off. Rincewind saw his own arm snap up until the shimmering blade was humming a mere inch from his throat. He tried to force his fingers to let go. They wouldn't. I don't know how to be a hero, he shouted. I propose to teach you. Oh my god. Well, that's interesting. Bronze... What is that word? Bronze Cepha rumbled deep in his throat. What is that? Cassandra, the dragon rider, leaned forward and squinted across the clearing. I see him, he said. He swung himself down easily from branch to branch and landed lightly on the tussocky grass, drawing his sword. He took a long look at the approaching man, who was obviously not keen on leaving the shelter of the trees. He was armed, but the dragon rider observed with some interest the strange way in which the man held the sword in front of him at arm's length, as though embarrassed to be seen in its company. That's really not far from the truth. Cassandra held his own sword and grinned expansively as the wizard shuffled toward him. Then he leapt. Later, he remembered only two things about this fight. He recalled the uncanny way in which the wizard's sword curved up and caught his own blade with a shock that jerked it out of his grip. The other thing, and it was this he averred that led to his downfall, was that the wizard was covering his eyes with one hand. Oh, Rincewind. Oh, Rincewind. Cassandra jumped back to avoid another thrust and fell full length on the turf. With a snarl, Cepha unfolded his great wings and launched himself from his tree. A moment later, the wizard was standing over him, shouting, Tell it that if it singes me, I'll let the sword go. I will. I'll let it go. So tell it. The tip of the black sword was hovering over Cassandra's throat. What was odd was that the wizard was obviously struggling with it, and it appeared to be singing to itself. Cepha, Cassandra shouted. The dragon roared in defiance, but pulled out of the die that would have removed Rincewind's head and flapped ponderously back to the tree. Talk, screamed Rincewind. Cassandra squinted at him up the length of the sword. What would you like me to say? He asked. What? I said, what would you like me to say? Where are my friends? The barbarian and the little man is what I mean. I expect they have been taken back to the Wormburg. Rincewind tugged desperately against the surge of the sword, trying to shut his mind to Kring's bloodthirsty humming. What's a Wormburg? He said. The Wormburg. There is only one. It is Dragonholm. And I suppose you were waiting to take me there, eh? Cassandra yelped involuntarily as the tip of the sword pricked a bead of blood from his Adam's apple. Don't want people to know you've got dragons here, eh? Snarled Rincewind. The dragon rider forgot himself enough to nod and came within a quarter inch of cutting his own throat. Rincewind looked around desperately and realized that this was something he was really going to have to go through with. Right then, he said, as diffidently as he could manage. You'd better take me to this Wormburg of yours, hadn't you? I was supposed to take you in dead, muttered Cassandra sullenly. Rincewind looked down at him and grinned slowly. It was a wide, manic, and utterly humorless rictus. It was a sort of grin that is normally accompanied by small riverside birds wandering in and out, picking scraps out of the teeth. Alive will do, said Rincewind. If we're talking about anyone being dead, remember whose sword is in which hand. It's funny because he's not threatening at all. I wouldn't be scared of him at all. Can we go back to the fact that he just described Rincewind as a small riverside bird who wanders in and out picking scraps out of the teeth? That sounds exactly like him. Anyway, if you kill me, nothing will prevent Cepha killing you, shouted the prone dragon rider. So what I'll do is I'll chop bits off, agreed the wizard. He tried the effect of the grin again. Oh, all right, said Cassandra sulkily. You think I've got no imagination? He wriggled out from under the sword and waved at the dragon, which took wing again and glided in toward them. Rincewind swallowed. You mean we've got to go on that? He said. Cassandra looked at him scornfully, the point of Kring still aimed at his neck. How else would anyone get to the Wormburg? I don't know, said Rincewind. How else? I mean, there's no other way. It's flying or nothing. Rincewind looked again at the dragon before him. He could quite clearly see through it to the crushed grass on which it lay, but when he gingerly touched a scale that was a mere golden sheen on thin air, it felt solid enough. Either dragon should exist completely or fail to exist at all, he felt. Dragon only half existing was worse than the extremes. Was it? Cassandra shrugged. Didn't you? Oh, excuse me, I missed a sentence. I didn't know dragons could be seen through, he said. Cassandra shrugged. Didn't you? He said. He swung himself astride the dragon awkwardly because Rincewind was hanging onto his belt. Once uncomfortably aboard, the wizard moved his white-knuckle grip to a convenient piece of harness and prodded Cassandra lightly with the sword. Have you ever flown before? Said the dragon rider, without looking around. Not as such. No. Would you like something to suck? Rincewind gazed at the back of the man's head, then dropped to the bag of red and yellow sweets that was being proffered. Is it necessary? He asked. It is traditional, said Cassandra. Please yourself. The dragon stood up, lumbered heavily across the meadow, and fluttered into the air. Rincewind occasionally had nightmares about teetering on some intangible but enormously high place and seeing a blue-distanced, cloud-punctuated landscape reeling away below him. These usually woke him up with his ankles sweating, He would not have been even more worried had he known that the nightmare was not, as he had thought, just the usual Discworld vertigo. It was a backward memory of an event in his future so terrifying that it had generated harmonics of fear all the way along his lifetime. Oh my god. Something so scary it scares you in the past. This was not that event. Oh, what is the... I don't want to know. But it was good practice for us. What is good... What's the act... Oh, no. Cepha clawed its way into the air with a series of vertebrae-shattering bounds. At the top of its last leap, the wide wings unfolded with a snap and spread out with a thump which shook the trees. Then the ground was gone, dropping away in a series of gentle jerks. Cepha was suddenly rising gracefully, the afternoon sunlight gleaming off wings that were still no more than a golden film. Rincewind made the mistake of glancing downward and found himself looking through the dragon to the treetops below. Far below. His stomach shrank at the sight. Closing his eyes wasn't much better, because it gave his imagination full rein. He compromised by gazing fixedly into the middle distance, where moorland and forest drifted by, and could be contemplated almost casually. Wind snatched at him. Cassidra half turned and shouted into his ear, "Behold the Wyrmberg!" Rincewind turned his head slowly, taking care to keep Kring resting lightly on the dragon's back. His streaming eyes saw the impossibly inverted mountain rearing out of the deep forested valley like a trumpet in a tub of moss. Even at this distance, he could make out the faint octarine glow in the air that must be indicating a stable magic aura of at least, he gasped, several milliprime? At least. "Oh no," he said. I don't get that. Even looking at the ground was better than that. He averted his eyes quickly and realized that he could now no longer see the ground through the dragon. As they glided around in a wide circle toward the Wyrmberg, it was definitely taking on more of a solid form, as if the creature's body was filling with a gold mist. By the time the Wyrmberg was in front of them, swinging wildly across the sky, the dragon was as real as rock. Is that like a protective measure, like they get invisible the further they are from home? Rincewind thought he could see a faint streak in the air, as if something from the mountain had reached out and touched the beast. He got the strange feeling that the dragon was being made more genuine. Ahead of it, the Wyrmberg turned from a distant toy to several billion tons of rock poised between heaven and earth. He could see small fields, woods, and a lake up there, and from the lake a river spilled out and over the edge. He made the mistake of following the thread of foaming water with his eyes, and jerked himself back just in time. The flared plateau of the upturned mountain drifted toward them. The dragon didn't even slow. As the mountain loomed over Rincewind like the biggest fly swatter in the universe, he saw a cave mouth. Cepha skimmed toward it, shoulder muscles pumping. The wizard screamed as the dark spread and enfolded him. There was a brief vision of rock flashing past, blurred by speed. Then the dragon was in the open cave. It was inside a cave, but bigger than any cave had a right to be. He's calling it rude. The dragon, gliding across its vast emptiness, was a mere gilded fly in a banqueting hall. There were other dragons, gold, silver, black, white, flapping across the sun-shafted air on errands of their own or perched on outcrops of rock. High in the domed roof of the cavern, scores of others hung from huge rings, their wings wrapped bat-like around their bodies. There were men up there, too. Rincewind swallowed hard when he saw them, because they were walking on that broad expanse of ceiling like flies. Then he made out the thousands of tiny rings that studded the ceiling. A number of inverted men were watching Cepha's flight with interest. Rincewind swallowed again. For the life of him, he couldn't think of what to do next. "Well?" he asked in a whisper. "Any suggestions?" "Obviously you attack," said Kring scornfully. "Why didn't I think of that?" said Rincewind. "Could it be because they all have crossbows?" "You're a defeatist." Defeatist? That's because I'm going to be defeated." "You're your own worst enemy, Rincewind," said the sword. You giving him like a moral pep talk? Rincewind looked up at grinning men. "Bet," he said wearily. Before Kring could reply, Cepha reared in midair and alighted on one of the large rings, which rocked alarmingly. "Would you like to die now, or surrender first?" asked Cassidra calmly. Men were converging on the ring from all directions, walking with a swaying motion as their hooked boots engaged the ceiling rings. Okay, I'm nearing 50 minutes, so I'm going to stop here and keep reading in another video.